Okay, Cameron Crowe and Apollo. I'm sorry,
It's
sorry,
Annisen.
Apollo Annisen.
Yep.
Yes, my apologies. That's bad form
It's
for
okay. You don't have to apologize.
apologize. Nice. Okay, so Apollo and I. This is our first face to face. We don't actually know each other well. It feels like I know Apollo really well after the last 2 weeks of maybe a million Facebook messages and comments, but
Oh man, yeah.
yeah, I if this is the first interview you've watched, I will set the stage really quick before we kind of dive into Apollo's Coal Valley story. Um, so I wrote a blog post a little over 2 weeks ago. I guess it's like almost 3 weeks now. I'm losing track of time, but
I think it's only been two.
okay, okay, that's good.
It'll be like three at the end of this week.
Okay, so I wrote this blog post. This is actually a reprint. It's on our new website, which is called coalvalleyspeaks.com. It forwards this Medium publication. But I've reposted it here to keep everything together. But I basically explained, I felt compelled. I've been having a lot of conversations over the last years and months, and like my reflections on Coal Valley have really crystallized, and it's really disturbed me how messed up I think my Coal Valley educational experience was looking back. And I felt like this is a story that needed to be told, and people need to know about this as that these are real experiences that I had, and I believe other people are having, and it's a big problem, and people need to know about it. And hopefully, if anybody else feels this way, you're not alone. And especially prospective parents, you're thinking about putting your kid in Coal Valley, I want you to have this data point.
Right.
So I posted it, and it blew up. My phone has been on fire for every day since then.
How have you
Um,
been sleeping?
it's been pretty hard, actually.
Yeah, I
Even
feel you
with,
there.
well, I can do not disturb.
First couple nights, I definitely had some bad sleep, and there have been a couple of people who've reached out to me in the last couple of weeks that have also lost a little bit of sleep over just because I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe the story, or I couldn't believe that I was having this conversation with this person. Just nuts. I guess I'll start
Totally.
off. So I
Yeah,
went.
I want to know kind of like what went through your mind when you saw this,
Uh,
and kind of, I'm sure it brought back a lot of memories and kind of how you've been thinking about it.
I didn't really consider Coal Valley because growing up, and I have to sort of put this in context. I had a lot of turmoil in my childhood. I had an abusive parent. There was a lot of I was bullied both like in school and in daycare, and I was an only child, so I didn't have friends and I didn't go out. I was definitely like an isolated kid, and so I didn't really contribute much of what had happened to me as a kid directly to Cole.
Hmm.
So hearing someone else say, "Hey, looking back on that school, it was kind of screwed up," and I went, I
Kind of
feel
extremely screwed up.
we're like some of our experiences were awful. They were terrible, and hearing you say like, I don't think that this was okay. My first reaction was, oh, you don't know the half of it.
That's
You
what I've
thought it was
realized.
bad. You don't know what I experienced, and that's when I immediately reached out to you. And I think it was after I reached out to you, or some point, very shortly after I joined that support group, and within a couple of days, there were stories that I was like, I thought I had it bad. I thought of everyone in the school, no one could have possibly had it worse than me, and I was wrong. And that was another huge thing for me, was sort of coming to terms with like I wasn't the only person who was affected by that school and had to carry some trauma out of the school. Um,
Yeah. So I want to pause you right there. You said you used the word trauma, and that is, I 100% I think agree with that word choice. And some people have criticized me for calling it that. They're like, "Oh, really? What? Like somebody was whiny? Like somebody like had a bad like
No,
experience.
no,
What
no,
do
no,
you
no,
have to
no.
say to that criticism?
Oh my God, you don't. Here's the thing. There are four criticisms of that, 4 points that I would offer to counterpoint that. One, my experience. I was so repressed in that school. That school repressed me and LGBT people so completely that I didn't know I was trans for 19 years. I had a conversation with a roommate during which we both figured out that I fit into this category perfectly that I didn't know existed. And it blew my mind. One. Two, there was a girl who went to our school who was in my grade who was raped when she was 12. There was another girl who was raped when she was, I think, either 14 or 15, and she was told by one of the higher ups of that school that no one would believe her if she were to speak out about it. Four, my mother was a chaperone on the Washington, D.C. trip, and the parents, the other chaperones and the teachers ostracized her just as bad as they did me. She had, during a parent-teacher meeting, she had another parent, the mother of another student, one of my bullies, come up to my mother and tell her that I was a bad student. Those four things, I think that was either 3 or 4. I can't remember, but like that handful of things right there should be enough to tell you that there was a culture that is not kind towards outsiders there. And I was an outsider because I was in isolation and I lived in a box, and because my parents lived in a box, and because we weren't donating a ton of money to the school, and we weren't participating in sporting events, and we weren't part of the Coal Valley community. I didn't make friends with the parents. Didn't like me, and the parents didn't like my parents, and then their kids didn't like me. It really just it was a whole culture of like ostracism, at least for me. My experience was I didn't fit in anywhere.
Yeah. What do you think? I know that we've got a lot there's a lot of
to unpack. As far as saying that's whining, like don't tell me that rape is whining. Don't tell me that kids who want to commit suicide because they're gay and their school tells them that they're not Christian is whining. Don't tell me that no one will believe you that you got raped, even though everyone in this room knows you got raped. Like, don't tell me that's not traumatizing.
And not to go to the law.
Right. Don't tell me that a child suffering the loss of a parent is told by the school counselor, tells the parent, the remaining parent of that school counselor, oh, she's fine. She doesn't need any help. She's just okay. She's a child. She can't process that. At some point, I don't know if it's foolishness or if it's malice. I really don't. And I want to give Coal Valley the benefit of the doubt. I want to say that maybe they're trying. And I think that if they really want to improve, they're going to listen to every single one of these interviews, and they're going to listen to our suggestions when we say this is what you can do to change.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned there's kind of like a culture of judgment and, like you're in or you're out. We've heard that from dozens of people in the recent days, and people sharing their stories. I've heard that from tons of people not in our support group. Just like
there's
it's almost like that's the image of Coal Valley. It's like a holier than thou. You're not good. You're not good enough. You're not Christian enough. Where do you think that comes from?
Oh gosh. Well, for me, it comes from religion. That's what I believe it comes from. I believe it comes from religion. I feel like there's going to be some amount of that environment when you have a religious school. And I personally, I'll just come right out and say it. I'm against religious schooling. I don't think it's moral to raise a child saying this is the correct belief system. I think what you need to do is you need to say, here's the evidence that we have. Make your own decision. It's okay to make whatever decision you have. And I know that there are Christians who would disagree with me. But I also know, so while I'm against, I think that religious schooling is immoral. I'm also not foolish enough to believe that we should regulate that. I'm not against the law that says it's okay to raise your children however you wish and in whatever fashion that you wish. Obviously, we have some freedoms. So I'm not against the law, but I'm against religious schooling. And I think that whenever you have a religious school, there's always going to be some amount of in-group, out-group. It's not always, it's never going to be a completely, how do I put this? A completely inclusive environment, because you've already put up the wall of this is the religion, and you're either part of the religion or you're not.
Yeah, you make the cut or you don't, or whatever.
Right. And I think from there, it really comes down to how do you deal with that? How do you as a faculty deal with outside opinions? And in a non-denominational school where some people believe that it's perfectly okay for for homosexual couples to get married, adopt children, and raise families together, there's also going to be people who are in that school who believe that homosexuals should be put to death. And if both types are teaching at that school, there's eventually going to become some amount of tribalism, because you have such opposing viewpoints. And I don't know how to solve that problem. All I can do is analyze it.
Yeah, no, you said that there'll be some people that think homosexuals should be put to death. And when I heard you say it, some people might be watching this and might think that's crazy. No way anybody thought that. But when you said that, I was thinking like, yeah, that was actually pretty common, and I think I heard people say it explicitly. I think
I wouldn't say that I ever heard anybody say it explicitly, but I remember there being like, are they really Christian? And
I don't think I heard that from teachers. I will admit that, but I think
I would say it was
something
where students where they were asking questions outright. But there were also teachers who were outwardly against some of those things. And I'm not really just talking about LGBT. I'm talking about like extremist, like far right, crazy viewpoints. Like, these people who subscribe to this belief system are crazy, and people who
like liberalism
for life deserve to die. There's like anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti.
If you're a Democrat, you have a mental illness.
Right. And there's absolutely like.
That was a quote. That's a direct quote, actually. Somebody was mentioning that.
Yeah. And I remember it being referred to as like, well, some people are tempted to commit arson, and some people are tempted to like rape people, and some people are tempted to be gay, and God loves them all, but it's still very wrong. It's as that, and they're not comparing it to like lying or stealing something. They're comparing it to like rape and murder.
Absolutely, yeah. Those were on the same plane.
And obviously that doesn't make anybody who can't control how they feel any better about them.
Right. This is not a choice.
Right.
And just the fact that like even if there was even if it was let's just thought experiment on that. Like, would anyone ever in the history of Coal Valley choose to be gay, knowing what kind of daily, hourly discrimination they would?
Right. Why would that be a choice? And I think that their counter argument to that is, well, they're tempted to do it. And it's like, well, I'm not like, okay, maybe I'm tempted to like punch someone I don't like in the face, but I'm not going home being upset about it. I'm not going home and like freaking out that, I don't feel like I'll never not be able to punch somebody in the face because it's who I am inside. Like it goes that the feeling goes a lot deeper than I think anybody who wants to write it off as a sinful temptation or a mental illness gives it credit for. It goes a lot deeper than that. And I would say that that's just something that's self-evident in the relationships that I've had. is that, for me, I'm attracted to a person. I'm not attracted to a gender. And so I can understand where there might just be something. Anyways, I don't want to get into like disproving or talking about why.
Right.
We know that they're not making it up, and it's not something that they can control, and it's not something they have a choice over. There's plenty of evidence out there. I don't have to sit here and take you through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like there was definitely a toxicity around mental health. I think that anybody who was experiencing any kind of anxiety-related issue, depression, I don't know students from that school who didn't have some point of depression while they were in that school. Like, I don't know anybody who I've talked to who hasn't been like, oh yeah, I was totally depressed.
That's an interesting point. I think you're probably spot on there.
And it's treated like you're not in love with God. You're not enough in love with God. You're not being spiritual enough. You're not being.
You don't have enough faith.
Right. You don't have enough faith. And to that I say, like, I tried. Once I hit middle school was about when it started to turn, and it started to be like, oh, I'm in a religious environment, and it's not great, but it's probably not worse than what I would have in a public school. And then middle school and high school is, I think, where it really went sour. And once I got into middle school, I experienced an incredible amount of bullying in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, things kind of started to turn a corner. And I thought, maybe if I get closer to God, maybe if I really, really work on my relationship with Jesus and really put myself into it, these things, the relationships in my life will turn around. Maybe being more godlike is gonna make things better for me. And it didn't. It really didn't. And then my junior year, I transferred so I left after 10th grade, and then 11th grade, I switched schools and I started going to Rocky Mountain. And I had to figure out to not be pious around my new friends because none of them are religious. I was the only, I think there was one other only
culture shock, reverse. It's like a culture shock. You like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I had this moment when I was probably 3 months in where I was like, wait, like that guy's Catholic, but he doesn't go to church. And that girl's Christian, but she doesn't go to church. And the rest of my friends either don't care or aren't Christian. And I was shocked. I had a friend who was atheist, and I was like, what? I didn't know atheist. Like, I thought that they were like in like California. I thought that they were in like
Satan worshippers. Yeah.
Right.
Murderers. Yeah.
I didn't realize that they were normal people. And then, of course, I'll just touch on this. I did the exact opposite. I had a moment where I was like, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what Cole taught me to do. So I moved to San Francisco. I got a really liberal view. I had to go hang out and like learn to be around big crowds and people with different religions and people from different ethnic backgrounds and people with all sorts of different traumas and learn how to operate with those people. And then to bring it back here and like now looking back at Cole Valley and just being like, man, we were so isolated. That's what it was.
Life. Different life. Yeah.
It's an echo chamber.
So you mentioned bullying, and there's a lot of stories about bullying. Like, what would you say? Would you say if somebody were to say to you, like, of course there's bullying at Cole Valley, there's bullying everywhere. Like, okay. This is normal. Like, it's not Cole Valley's fault. Like, do you think it's different at Cole Valley?
It is. And I have this. I think I have this written down. Right. Okay. So bullying was rampant in that school, and not just from the students. So 5th grade, I had a teacher who bullied me. Like, in front of the class, she would mock me. If I asked a question, she would mock me. Anytime
what would she say?
I can't think of like specific examples.
That's okay.
It's like multiple instances, but I have one specific one that I remember. We were learning about fractions, and she said, she was explaining that like 1/2 is 1/2, and 1/3 is 1/3, and 1/4 is 1/4. And I said, well, what's 1/1? And she looks at me and she goes, well, you can't have 1 once. And the whole class, breaks out into a little bit of giggling and a little bit of laughter. And I remember just feeling so stupid for asking. It was a legitimate question. We started at 2. We always start at 1. Why didn't we start at 2? Come to find out, like, not even 2 years later, that 1/1 totally is a thing. That it actually means something in math, and it's used in algebra, and it's something that you have when it's part of showing your work. So not only did she mock me, she was wrong, and she missed an opportunity to educate me to instead mock me. Then I moved into high school, and I had teachers who would ignore the fact that other students were picking on me. They would ignore the fact that other students were picking on me. And then whenever I retaliated, I would get in trouble. So, for instance, I was stuck, I think, at like the nurse's office or something. I got held up between periods, and I walked into class probably 3 seconds after the bell had rung. And as I walked in, one of the other students said, "Oh, look who's tardy." And I just looked at him and I said, "Shut up." And the whole class went, and the teacher said, go to I can't remember what it was, but it was like detention or whatever. I got in trouble for going like, shut up. Like, you don't know my life. I got in trouble for defending myself. Yeah. I became a doormat because none of the teachers ever stood up for me. And it took place in class. It took place while they were teaching in front of them. Maybe bullying takes place in all schools where the teachers don't see, but good schools have policies that say if you see somebody getting bullied, send the kid to detention, because the bully needs to be taught a lesson. And instead they were told that whatever resistance they were met with would be quashed by the rest of the staff. I had one teacher stand up for me my entire time at Coal Valley, and it was when he watched another student push me to the ground. It was the only physical violence I'd ever experienced at Coal Valley. It was the only time a teacher ever stood up for me. It was so very obvious that child needed detention that I think my parents would have sued the school if nothing had happened. The teacher was standing like right there. That was the only time.
Do you think this teacher would have stood up for you if Probably. It was less obvious?
I think if it had been something less obvious, probably not. He was pretty solid about, at least in the classroom, keeping the class quiet. So there wasn't really an opportunity for the sort of crosstalk that would usually that was the stuff that would usually sort of single me out. Kids were pretty quiet in his class. I wouldn't say that I was actively bullied in his class. He had a pretty good grip on the class, but other teachers who were less respected by students were certainly less likely to bully me, or certainly less likely to stand up when I was being bullied. I honestly couldn't say. I do remember that he wasn't particularly nice to me in other cases. I remember, occasionally he would take away books from me, and it was so ridiculous. There were double standards everywhere. There were other students who would read or draw during class, and I was not allowed to do that. If I was drawing, I got in trouble. If I was reading, they would take the book away from me.
What do you mean, like doodling while they're lecturing, or what are we talking about?
Well, yeah, if it's obvious that I'm working on a drawing, like an actual piece, instead of just doodling. They would be like, hey, don't draw. They would take the drawing away and give it back to me at the end of class. Same thing with the books. Occasionally they take the book away for the whole day, which is, frustrating when you want to read it at lunch. And then, gosh, I remember at least once or twice pulling out pieces of notebook paper to take notes. And the teacher being like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm taking notes. And being like, oh, we're not allowed to, you don't pass notes in my class. No, I'm taking notes. Like, that sort of like weird, whatever you're saying to defend yourself, shut up. You're subordinate. Don't speak up for yourself.
It's like you were on thin ice.
With everyone all the time. And you're the screw up kid, and you're the one that's not doing well. Even though I had pretty solid grades. I had straight A's at the beginning of 5th grade. My parents really wanted me to have straight A's. They were like, you're going to get all of this good stuff at home if you get straight A's. And then I got straight A's and nothing happened. It was still crap at home. But I had A's and B's and A's and B's and A's and B's and A's and B's. And then the first time I ever brought home a C, my parents came down on me like hellfire. But that notwithstanding, like, I was a pretty solid student. I was A's and B's. I was in the advanced class. So I was taking the higher writing class, and I was taking the higher math classes. And because we had such a small class, the unfortunate thing was, I had the same group of 25 students in every single one of my classes throughout the day. Save.
Yeah, it was the same with me, yeah.
And if all of those students bully me in one class, they bully me in the next class.
There's no getting away.
Right. There's no getting away from them. Not at all. There's not a class where I can get some breathing room. And the whole class is sort of in on, you are ostracized. I had one friend from 2nd grade to 8th grade who left after 8th grade, and then I spent 2 years in that school with no real friends in my grade. Acquaintances, people who were nice to me, but no real friends in that grade, in my own grade. And so when I went on the DC trip in 9th grade, that was a week of hell. I mean, it was worse for some people than it was for me, I know, but it was awful. I was isolated. I was lonely. The people that I was counting on to like hang out with me and this trip was supposed to grow as a class, and you're all going to coagulate and you're going to find your place and fit in. Yeah, my place is outside the rest of the group, and everyone knows it. I was the scapegoat of the group, really. I mean, the special needs kids, the mentally handicapped kids got more respect in that class than I did. Which is, I mean, that's really saying something about the environment of the school. You wouldn't expect that. You wouldn't expect somebody who's kind of like normal. I wouldn't say normal. I shouldn't have said any of that, but
well, just that you were I think I know what you mean. It's like
what, like, how is it
I'm a special category.
Right. The kids with handicaps are getting more respect. Like, you would expect the kids with handicaps to get bullied worse, and they were treated with more respect than I was. The class is really in on, like,
So you were like an enigma.
Yeah, and I think I figured out why much later on. One, being trans. 2, finding out that I'm on the autistic spectrum. And 3, just kind of being a weird nerd to begin with. I'm a little cagey because I grew up in isolation.
You're a triple threat.
I am. I'm an odd one, and I like it. It's great. I've embraced it, and I found a community of weirdos. And that was another thing that changed a lot when I transferred schools. I switched to Rocky Mountain, and within 6 months, I had a friend group that was inviting me to parties, that was wanting to hang out, that wanted to work on group projects with me, that wanted to be in classes with me, that wanted to hang out with me at lunch. And then my senior year, I was like, and this is crazy, I was the king of the nerds. All of the weird, outcast, strange, goofy kids who were into anime and Kingdom Hearts and Naruto and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering. We're all gathered in this stairwell at lunch, and I'm going through, like, my senior year was it was great at school, it was hell at home. And I would like leave. I left that friend group because I needed space, and within like 2 weeks, they would all come find me again. I was like queen bee to these guys. And my teachers even, my PTA meetings changed for my parents. They went from your kid has all of these issues to your kid has all of this to contribute. Your kid is smart. Your kid is curious. Your kid asks questions. Your kid has really brilliant ideas. Your kid speaks up when I ask the class a question. You know, your kid has always got their homework in on time. Like really positive things to say about me just by switching schools. So
why do you think that is?
Because I'm still the same kid.
Absolutely. Do you think it's like there's a Coal Valley mold that like good Christian kids are like this, and you know the range of what people are like, all this stuff is unappreciated. It's just like everybody needs to be like this.
I think that's absolutely correct. I think that there's 4 or 5 different shades of one color you're allowed to be. You know, you can be this person, or you can, like, we have, you know, 4 different avatars of a person. You can be the humble Christian, you can be the outspoken Christian, you can be the passionate Christian, you can be the loving Christian, you can be the fun Christian, you can be the super like Bible bashing serious Christian. Like, but if you're not one of those enough, and also like fitting
then
in,
your problem.
Don't already fit in with the rest of the group, then you can't be part of the group.
Yeah. So you mentioned that beforehand that you did have some teachers you really appreciated, though.
Yes, there were. And I wouldn't say that all of my teachers were bad. I mean, of the 3 or 4 teachers that I go back and I kind of chew on what they were trying to teach me. You know, the one that stands out the most, Mr. Bergeron, like, he was great. And I will give him credit. I don't believe that he was nice to me because my parents paid him to tutor me. I believe that he was nice to me because he's a genuinely good person. He wasn't always on top of some of the bullying that went on in his class, but he would admonish us if we got out of control. He was an extremely patient teacher. He was very fun to be around, and he would always try to frame things in a way that made you feel a little bit better. And he really cared about me. There were a couple of things that he did for me just personally as a student that were so above and beyond and made me feel like, okay, you know, that somewhat redeemed my experience.
What were those things?
Well, he bought me some sodas on my birthday one year, right when Coke came out with like the cane sugar versions of their stuff.
Oh,
so they had like the old Coke and the old Mountain Dew. I think he brought like one of each of those for my birthday. He bought me a Jars of Clay CD. He got me a subscription to like it was a little Christian magazine that would come in the mail every month. You know, it was just there were just a lot of nice small things that he did that
gestures,
right, that made me feel a lot less alone in that school. I really like looking back on it. If there's anybody, I've tried to reach out to him again, but I've always had this conflict of like, I don't think I can put aside how I feel about Cole and the fact that you still teach there, and the fact, you know, and how I feel about religious schools as a whole and religious schools as a whole. Like, if every Christian was like Mr. Bergeron, I would be Christian, even though I don't believe the fundamentals, you know, of the faith are true. Even though I don't believe what's in the Bible, if every Christian was like Mr. Bergeron,
you'd want to be like them, yeah.
Because it would be a reliable way of making you a better person. It would be if 100% of Christians were Mr. Bergeron, I'd convert, because obviously it makes you a good person. And he was. I mean, he was incredible. He was extremely kind and extremely patient and an incredible listener. The other 2 teachers I would mention, I think it was one of the Smiths I had as an art teacher. And he was pretty friendly. And then Miss Melhoff, who had a ton of love for her students, and was definitely a shoulder to cry on for anybody who ever went in. Yeah, when she had like an empty office. Obviously, you couldn't do it during class, but if you ever wanted to go and talk to her, she was always open.
Yeah.
And she was a ton of fun. I mean, she had us read Hamlet in 7th grade. Who reads Hamlet in 7th grade? I mean, that's something that I've heard college freshmen complain about doing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I have some very positive things to say about a handful of teachers, but the overwhelming majority were either okay, didn't help, or actively contributed to the problem.
And I kind of want to come back to that thing you said about Mr. Bergeron, is that you feel kind of conflicted because like you appreciate what he, his influence on your Cole experience.
Right.
But there's like some sort of resentment that he's a part of Cole still, like that he's contributing to it, or like what
I
is
would not call it resentment. I would not call it resentment. It is how do I'm trying to think of a really good analogy for how I feel.
Okay.
So imagine imagine for instance you are like a veterinarian and a guy brings his dog in and you notice that the collar on the dog is too tight. And you say, hey, the collar on your dog is a little too tight. It needs to be loosened. And, you tell him this. And then when he comes back, the dog's collar is still tight. Like, that he's doing something that's not good for the dog. He doesn't know that he's doing something that's not good for the dog. So he believes that he is doing something positive and he's contributing to something positive and he's making a positive change in the world. And I see what he's doing as he's part of a system that is hurting everything. And while he is not actively contributing to the harm that is being done, his efforts would be better placed somewhere that's not toxic. I don't want him influenced. I don't want him like on board with this gross, angry, toxic ship that to me is Cole Valley. It hurts me. I would rather see him making a positive influence either at a different private school or a public one, because I don't agree. He's such a good person and that place is so terrible. And that's where my conflict is that it's like part of his life.
Yeah, it's like unintended negative consequences. Like you might not be a bad person. You might be a good person, but you're perpetuating a bad system that is oppressing people.
Right. You're in and he's such an asset to that school. I can't even begin to tell you. We sat down with a math problem that he made up. He didn't know if it could be solved. And while we were solving it, we found out something about that problem set that neither of us had known. We discovered a new theory together during one of our tutoring sessions. That man is brilliant. He multiplies triple-digit numbers in his head to pass time. He's so smart. And he loves to pass that knowledge on. And if he were to be in like some private, like, you have to be hella smart to get into this school, imagine the difference he could make in those kids' lives. He would be, I believe that a teacher like Mr. Bergeron would be in a lot better position to influence children positively if he wasn't teaching at Cole. That being said, I'm also not his father. I'm also not God. So he
probably thinks he's doing the right thing.
Right. He probably thinks that he's doing the right thing. And he's been doing this since I was a kid. I imagine that his oldest daughter is probably old enough to graduate by now, or she's probably.
Whoa. That's weird. I haven't thought about Mr. Bergeron's daughter in ages, but I remember when she was a teen.
I remember when she learned to wave.
Whoa. Man,
Yeah,
that's crazy. That
that
just
girl's
really to
probably
me is like,
teeming.
yeah, it's been a long time.
If you're watching this, Sophie, we love you.
You were
um,
super cute. I don't know
yeah,
what
you were super cute.
yeah,
But that's the thing is that like his family is part of that. That he's part of that. He's it's part of his community. It's part of his culture. It's part of his family now. And I
yeah,
understand how important family is because or community is. And I say family slash community interchangeably because my family is crap. My family currently consists of my mom, and that's it. And so my family is my community, the people that are important to me. And I think that when you're in Coal Valley, that's kind of the same way. Your family is this extension of, the community. The family is extended to this community that you're in. And Mr. Bergen's been in that community for so long. It, I don't think I could expect him. I could never expect him or even ask him to pull himself away from that. That's not something I should. That's not my place to do. Like that. That is something that I wouldn't ask him to do. Because it's interchangeable. I think it's just kind of a sad casualty of the culture is that I don't think he's being. I don't think he's quite in the best position for his potential.
yeah,
He's brilliant. He's just
right.
incredibly brilliant.
So I know we're not almost to the end, but we're getting there, and I have like at least a few more things I want to ask you.
So
Uh,
tangential.
yeah, you
Okay.
mentioned you mentioned if everybody was like Mr. Bergeron, I would still be a Christian. So a lot of there's a huge theme in all these stories in the support group where like I was so turned off and I was so oppressed or messed up or like I had such a negative view of myself, and I had so much anxiety or depression or harassment or what have you, whatever the cause, like I am so turned off that I am an atheist now.
Yeah,
um, do
I
you
would.
like what do you think about that? And like you said, I'd be a Christian.
I would honestly. Even though I don't. So there are a couple of things for me personally that contributed to my loss of faith. The big one being the more Christian I was, the less friends I had. And so I tucked my faith away and here's the thing about faith is that the less you practice, the less it matters, the less important it gets, the less you think about it, the more agnostic you become. And that's kind of what happened to me was that I just sort of put it away and I thought about it from time to time and I thought, I'll eventually get back. God will probably understand that I need to just distance myself for a little bit. When I come back, he'll forgive me. And that distance got further and further and further and further and further. And I kind of just had this long thing of like, the Christian God will forgive me when I come back. And then I thought, maybe I should explore some other religions because I'm not so sure about Christianity. Like Christianity seems like it might be a little off. So I told myself that I would explore other religions, and it was while I was exploring other religions that the the falsehoods in the Bible and the falsehoods of what I've been taught are started to rise to prominence. No, the earth is not 6,000 years old. No, there was not a global flood. No, there was no census of the entire population of Rome ever recorded in Roman history. And even if there was, why would you have to return to the place of your birth? We're trying to figure out where people live. I
Never thought about that.
not where they were born. And there are so many little things that just started to add up. The faith healing, the lack of the lack of like awareness about mental health, the anti-LGBT stuff. There's just a long pile of things that started to add up, and I slowly drifted. And one day I was sitting in my room and I thought, why have I not called myself atheist yet? And this other voice went, because you're afraid that if you do, it will be blasphemy. And if you're wrong, you'll go to hell. And I went, do you even believe in hell? And the other voice went, no. And then I said, so what are we waiting for? And I guess nothing. And then I just said out loud, okay, I'm atheist. And it was really just kind of like watching this big thing just shrink, and then disappear. I would say that it was definitely ostracism and a bad environment and the piety and the holier than thou-ness that initially turned me away from Christianity, like hardcore Christianity. And then the overwhelming amount of evidence to the contrary did the rest of the work.
So, yeah, and this is one thing that people have been like, so I mentioned in my blog post that I'm atheist now. And people are like, yeah.
Oh God.
And a lot of the support group is, maybe the majority, I don't know. We haven't like done a poll. But, and so people are kind of like, well, are you rejecting God? Like, are you mad at God because of Coal Valley, so you reject him, and you being an atheist is just like, you're like, you know, big fuck you to the man, or, and I'm like, no, I just don't believe that there's a God anymore.
Right.
Like, it opened my eye, like, because of how messed up it was, I was like, maybe I should learn, like, maybe not everything's this messed up. And then like, it just started me down the path.
I would say that the mistreatment from other Christians is like someone slapping you in the face, looking you in the eye and screaming, "The emperor isn't wearing any clothes." And it takes that slap for you to go, "Oh, you're right." Right? So maybe it takes the slap to jog your memory, but here's the thing. From our perspective, the emperor was never wearing clothes. And while initially Christianity treated me in a way that turned me off from it, if it was correct, if it was real, if it was true, I would have come back. I would have come to the same conclusion. In my search for the truth and the search for what is correct and what I can honestly find out by checking as many different sources as possible, this is the belief that I've come to. And if the Christian belief system was correct, I would have come to the Christian belief system as my conclusion. But
like, there's nothing to fear from looking. If it's true, it will still be there.
Right. The truth is not going to change tomorrow. It is objective.
You should have nothing to fear from looking around and exploring ideas.
And if God has given me the ability to question and to be curious and to go find things and test things, then why shouldn't I use it? Why am I being admonished for finding evidence to the contrary and going, wait a second, this doesn't add up?
Right.
So what's more likely? God gave you curiosity and a bunch of evidence to not believe him, or he's not there. There's a lot of different. There's a ton of rhetoric. There's a ton of rhetoric and a ton of stuff that I could repeat for hours about why you and I are no longer atheists. And maybe for a lot of us, maybe for most of us in the group, it was the way we were treated that initially set us off. But it is not how we were treated that kept us away. Because if you were real, if it was true, we would have come back. If it was the truth, we would have come back. We don't. Rebellion for rebellion's sake after you've escaped the oppressor is useless. Why do you continue being mad at Coal Valley when you're no longer like, oh, I'm not going to be Christian. I'll show Coal Valley. Well, Coal Valley's 10 years in the past. Are you Christian now or what?
No, you kind of touched on something else too. Like, why are we still mad at Coal Valley? If it's not useful.
2 reasons. 1, some of us have not unpacked or processed this completely. I certainly have it. The reactions that I've had talking to some of the people that I have shows me that I haven't processed it completely. So this is important for the healing process. 1. 2, prevention. When we come together, we acknowledge that this is a problem, we acknowledge that something needs to be done about it, and then we implement changes, the problem will go away. If we let it sit in the past and we never do anything about it, nothing will ever change. There are gay students in that school right now. I know that there's at least one other student who attended Coal Valley at the same time as me who is transgender. Not going to name him. And there could be 5 other trans kids in that school right now. There could be 20 gay kids in that school right now. And if we're telling
well, 10%, it's like 10% of the population's
right.
of like any species, right, is not hetero.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It's not natural. Like, do you know what? Most species have gay individuals. Do you know what they don't have? Religions. Have you ever seen a fox in church? Coming up and,
what's the fox say?
Putting his little paws together and kneeling down in front of the cross. Oh man, please film that when it happens. No, like don't tell kids it's unnatural. Like, tell them, the Bible says that it's, and here's the other thing.
And not just because they are going to be extremely depressed and anxious, but like they are at risk of harming themselves fatally.
One of my best friends attempted suicide while we were both in that school together. Like, that's not something I knew about at the time.
And people might think this is like, oh, well, there's some problem kids that, that's going to happen to regardless. Like, the amount of stories.
Everyone can be saved.
The only thing it seems second to me, well, sexism is probably the most common. Like,
oh yeah,
hardcore sexism is like the biggest, most common.
And the misogyny, the anti-woman, the men are always right, protect the men.
You're asking for it if you show any skin. Rape culture.
Insane.
I would say suicidal thinking or suicide attempts are the next most common thing.
Yeah, which that stems from a lack of mental health care. It stems from an overwhelming amount of bullying, and it stems from being gay and feeling guilty, or being
feeling guilty. In Coal Valley,
that you're gross,
Yeah, and did you notice in the support group, people were talking about how in the student handbook, how they talk about homosexuality?
No, I never read the student handbook.
Oh my God, I thought you had seen this. Okay. So we are starting to look at everything with a magnifying glass now.
Going through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah. So like, we have, we're working on this joint statement of like the support group needs to say some stuff like these are problems and these are possible solutions. Like, we can't just let this keep happening because it's so bad. We had no idea how bad it was, and now we do, and it's not okay. And okay, so the biblical living or biblical lifestyle section of the student handbook is 2 paragraphs. The only thing that is concrete in those 2 paragraphs is homosexuality. All the ways you can get expelled for it. So get this. If you say that you're gay, if you don't say that you're gay, but you have gay sex, if you have a parent that's gay, and if you support, condone, and something else in any way homosexuality, you can be expelled.
Yeah,
Talk about a culture of hatred.
Okay, that right there, that is a fucking hate crime. That you cannot do that.
That's what I wonder.
What year was that?
It can't be legal, but there's not, add the words.
That's the thing, is that right now it's legal. At the time, right now it would be illegal for them to do that. At the time, it was not illegal for them to do that. But right now,
isn't it still legal?
So
the words haven't been added yet.
The federal government added the 4 words, meaning unless the Idaho state legislators wanted to fight it, and they tried to fight gay marriage, and the Supreme Court justice shot them down, they have to honor it, which is you cannot discriminate based on gender identity or sexual orientation.
Yeah, so that's what we haven't been able to add to the Idaho Constitution yet. But like what you're saying, it's like this could go all the way to the top, and it would
Right. No, it should. I'm fairly certain it's in the federal government constitution, meaning it would by proxy be in the Idaho state constitution, unless the Idaho state government fought it, and they wouldn't get it because they already lost on gay marriage.
Right.
So right now, if that's part of their statement right now, I'm
on paper.
Yeah, I'm 85% sure that is completely illegal. And might even qualify as like a hate crime because
because
they're a protected group.
If you're a gay student, you can't tell anybody.
Right. And you can't even tell your friend because you know, it like this is like Big Brother. And the culture really is like Big Brother. There was a girl.
If they catch you, you're gone.
Right. Right. There was a girl.
This might be the only friends you have, the only like security you have in your life.
Oh my God. I remember my parents threatened to take me out of Cole when I was in 8th grade, and I had a meltdown. I thought my life was going to be 10 times worse when I got into public school. And then my parents ran out of money to pay for it, and I didn't want to be there anymore. And my mom realized that everything was actually pretty terrible, and she put me in public school and things were better. But I was freaked out. You know,
think about how scary that'd be. That's all you've ever known.
Right.
Okay, so last 2 questions. What, if anything, do you want to say to Cole Valley administration? And also, what, if anything, do you want to say to prospective parents that are considering enrolling their child or children in Cole Valley?
I'm going to answer your second question first, which is if you are considering putting your kid in at Cole Valley, get on the Bishop Kelly waiting list. Just do it. I know that they're Catholic, but as Cole is right now, it's not a guarantee that your child is going to be in a healthy environment. And if they're not in a healthy environment, they're going to be in an environment so toxic, they will carry their scars into adulthood. We are 10 years out of school having problems.
Absolutely.
Please consider.
And I was a poster kid. I
know. And that's why it freaked me out when you posted it. When you were like, this was a problem. Yeah. So if you're thinking about putting your kid into Cole, please consider the overwhelming, huge pile of evidence we have been gathering and compiling here for you to look at. You don't have to look at all of it. Look at maybe 10 or 20% of it, and then maybe reevaluate whether or not you really want to put your kid in Cole. What I would say to Cole Valley right now, I would say that I don't completely believe that you are incapable of becoming a less toxic environment. I believe that you are capable of change if you truly, really want to be. Everybody gets a second chance from me. You need to teach your curriculum in a way that is not disparaging towards women and towards LGBT types. If someone asks you about homosexuality, just don't bring it up. Don't talk about it. If someone asks you about it and you're a faculty member, refer to them to a couple of verses, and then they can come to their own conclusion. That's what Mr. Bergeron did for me when I asked him. He cited verses. And 2, when you hear those toxic opinions, and you see bullying going on, when you hear the opinions that are potentially bad, like, and I'm not talking about like, it's okay for you to believe that homosexuality is wrong. It's not okay for you to believe that it's okay to go beat those people up or to go harass them or that they should be put in prison. Those beliefs infringe upon our right to not believe in your religion. So you need to learn when you see kids behaving in such a way and expressing beliefs that seem like they're going to lead to the sort of hateful behavior that has been described in the school, maybe quash that. Maybe stand up for the students. And then 3, please fix your curriculum so that it's not like lying about evolution and about world history. We can be taught about evolution. We'll need it for college. That's basically it. Fix the curriculum, make sure your kids aren't getting bullied, and avoid these controversial opinions. You you can just don't talk about them. It's that easy. Don't worry about it too much. And
You
if
don't
it's
have
not
to have a stance on everything.
right, and if it's controversial and it seems like it could potentially hurt somebody to have a hard stance, refer to the Bible and say come to your own conclusion, because more often than not you're going to come out with a pretty reasonable opinion. You're not going to come out being toxic unless you're encouraged.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's the last thing I could say, is that toxic environments, they don't get toxic because they don't just happen. As much as I hate to say that the victims contribute, and this is a very strange, like, victim blaming situation, the reason that some of us didn't stand up was because we were doormats. And the reason we were doormats is because nobody stood up. So start standing up for each other, start being proactive about the toxic and the negative behavior that you see. And if it doesn't change, bail. Leave that toxic dump pile to rot, and let it waste and let it rot away. And in 10 years, no one will put their kids there. But don't contribute to the system. Either fix it or leave. All right, I'll stop there. And I can sit here and rant at them.
Mic drop.
Poof.
Wow,
Yeah.
Apollo, such a great conversation. Thank you for
Thanks, Nick.
sharing
Thanks for
your
hearing
story.
me, man.
Man, it's
Yeah, I'm
you have some stuff to say.
I can't express how happy I am that I've got a platform to finally say some of what I've wanted to say.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of the solution. You've been
If anyone
huge.
wants to talk to me about trans stuff or atheist stuff, you can PM me on Facebook. And then my email is aannisen@gmail.com. And I don't always check it, but when I have time, I'll talk to you about whatever you want. Cool.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. And you've been a huge support to all the other people unloading some serious shit in the support group. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, it's nice to be acknowledged.
Yep. Okay. Well, you have a good rest of your night. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.
You do. Ciao.
All right. Bye.